Hello and welcome. This is Katy. Thanks so much for stopping by. I'm excited to be back with another project for Maker Forte. This time we're going to make a sympathy card. Now I ended up making 4 sympathy cards, the same exact layout, using the new Floating Ginkgos stamp set that's releasing for the month. And we're actually only going to use one color, which is tartan teal of the Color Hive inks. And then I'm going to use the Asteroid Shimmer Spray that we did a few videos back. The other thing I'm using is some cold press watercolor paper. Now normally I'm big time on hot pressed, but today I want the texture of cold pressed, so that's why we're going to use that. And this is the new Floating Ginkgo stamp set. So lots of sentiments in there, beautiful little floral images or leafy images. And so we're going to use that today. Now the watercolor paper measures 5 by 7, and so we just need to cut that in half. That's going to give us 2 panels that measure 3.5 by 5. Now I've taken some tartan teal and smushed a bunch of it onto my glass mat, and now I'm adding some clean clear water. Now you do not need a glass mat. All you need is a piece of acetate, or even like a glass plate from your kitchen is fine. You just need a smooth surface to be able to smush your inks and your watercolor paper in. Now the thing I do a little different is I'm adding my Asteroid Shimmer Spray onto my watercolor paper and then dipping it in to my tartan teal. The reason being is that I think that the watercolor paper picks up the tartan teal and gives a smoother look, a lighter look, and then it kind of gives us the start of our background. And then in between each dip, which I apologize, I'm going to be off camera doing this, but you can kind of see in the glare of my glass mat, I'm using my heat gun and I'm drying, just a surface dry, just a little bit of heat to take some of that moisture off the watercolor paper so that we can redip into the tartan teal that's on the glass mat and give us those color variations. Now, you could air dry this, but for time and everything else, heat setting is the way to go. Normally with my watercolor stuff, I definitely let it air dry because I find I get a better effect. But with this one, it actually gives you a much better effect and it's quicker. So in between, as my tartan teal is drying on my glass mat, I do take a little bit of shimmer spray to kind of reactivate it. And then I'm able to redip my panels onto my glass mat with my tartan teal. And you don't have to use shimmer spray. I'm using shimmer spray because I like the shimmer, but you could just use a spray bottle with clean water in it. And I'm trying to get as much of the ink off the glass mat as I can so that it doesn't go to waste. But there is always a little bit of waste when you're doing this type of technique. But that's why I have 4 panels, because in fact, I probably could have done one more, but I just kept with the 4. So once we get done, you're going to be able to see how pretty the color variation is, the little bit of shimmer in the card panels or the watercolor paper. Now here I'm taking an anti-static powder tool. This is just kaolin clay powder. I do this off to the side outside of my MISTI because I have a sticky grid mat in there, and every time I use a powder in there, it of course takes the stick away. So I'm trying to get that to last a little bit longer. But I ink up my stamp in Versamark ink twice, and then I apply my embossing powder, which this is the Wow Metallic Gold Rich embossing powder. It's one of my favorite golds. And I do them assembly line, so I get all the stamping, and then I apply the embossing powder, but then I heat set everything at the same time. Now I'm adding another stamping of the ginkgo leaves, but I'm adjusting the height. I'm bringing it up a little bit more on the panel just to give it some variation. And I will heat set that, and then I'm going to take my tartan teal and dip my number 2 round watercolor brush. This is just from Cheap Joe's. And dipping it into my ink pad and then coloring in our ginkgo leaves. I wanted the ginkgo leaves to have a little bit more teal, but I also needed to have a background, a backdrop. And so dipping first, then doing our stamping and embossing, and then coloring in was the perfect way to do this. Now, I'm just going to show you these few leaves here because it's the same technique, and I've got 4 panels that I have to do. But once I get done, I do a little bit more stamping up there in the top right corner, and the same process, stamp twice, and added the embossing powder. And now I'm just adding a little bit more of the tartan teal to color in those leaves because I had to add more stamping. Now, I did smush this onto my glass mat. You could do the same thing. When my watercolor brush there gets dry, I just dip it in a little bit of water just to kind of reactivate everything, and that keeps it flowing on my watercolor paper. Now I'm going to do our final stamping, which is our With Sympathy stamp that comes in our floating ginkgo stamp set. And you could do a thank you, you could do a happy birthday, but these were screaming sympathy cards to me, so that's why I went with a set of sympathy cards. Now, these little panels here are, it's 3 layers of 120-pound accent opaque cardstock. I use cardstock instead of foam or foam tape, so that's why I have that layered 3 times. I'm adding that to the back of my panel, and that is my dimension to be able to pop up my panel onto my A2 side folding card base. The card base is also accent opaque, 120-pound weight. Now I'm going to keep the insides blank until I actually need the cards, but I will use one of these stamp sets, the Heartfelt Sympathy or In Our Hearts Forever. Those are from scrapbook.com. But that is going to finish it up, my friends. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Be sure and check the description box below, and head on over to the Crafter Party Facebook group to share your makes with us. We'd love to see what you guys are making. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you in the next video.